Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. He has more than 2 decades of experience in the Army and now hosts a YouTube show called Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Welcome back to the show.
So the U.S. has given Israel the technology to turn these dumb bombs into guided bombs. Plus, Israel has one of the most complex militaries in the world. So how are they justifying these unguided munitions? We spoke with an IDF spokesperson earlier on in the show, and he said that they're using different types of munitions for different situations. I guess my other question is, what type of situation would warrant something that is unguided that can kill more civilians than intended?
Forget about what anybody's saying. I'm just telling you the military realities. Yeah. When you drop unguided bombs, they're not intended to be precise. They're area weapons. They're intended to take out areas, and there's no precision about it. And when you see the large percentage of bombs here, this is not just, well, they've been using all their precision weapons and now they're lower on inventory, so they've got to go to these other ones. That would be one thing, but this appears to be a systemic issue from the beginning and a well thought out issue, which when you look at all these things that you guys keep showing about the impact and the devastation in the Gaza Strip, I mean, it certainly looks like it's intention to destroy the civil infrastructure and the ability for the Palestinians to even live once this is over. I mean, that doesn't fit well with what Israel's saying, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But based on the military analysis of what's going on the ground, that's my best assessment.
It's really interesting because you're trying to square what Israel has said in terms of making sure to minimize the civilian casualties, but still continuing to use these imprecise or dumb bombs. Colonel Davis, the U.S. believes Israel is using a dive bomb technique, meaning a jet drops the dumb bomb while diving in the direction of the target. How does this tactic compare to using more advanced, precise bombs? What's the difference between this diving technique with dumb bombs and using something that's targeted and that uses a guided system?
We've actually provided those kits you're talking about to convert dumb bombs into precise bombs in Ukraine, and they worked pretty effectively, and they could here as well. The fact that they're not being used certainly raises some questions as to why that would be. But if you're not going to use the guidance system, then that's pretty much all you can do is to strafe an area with a jet and then drop it. And it's basically like back to your, Korean War, World War II type strafing runs where they have a bombardier and they have a target on the ground, and then they release the bombs and try to get it on target as much as they can, not being that concerned with where it lands because you just can't. But that's like the best you can do.
So President Biden issued a statement after this report was released, warning Israel yet again to protect citizens. Let's take a quick listen.
I want them to be focused on how to save civilian lives, not stop going after Hamas, but be more careful.
Shortly after, an Israeli war cabinet member said Americans are, quote, conducting a strategic and professional discourse, but are not trying to dictate anything to us. What does that tell you about U.S.-Israel relations? We heard from President Biden earlier in the week with the strongest messaging to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, urging him to take more care and be a little bit more surgical when it comes to operations right now. Are you starting to see cracks in this foundation here?
What I'm starting to see is a continued pattern to where the United States at the top levels, whether it's the president, national security advisor, secretary of state, secretary of defense, they've all made pretty strong statements. But you see that the response from the Israeli Defense Forces has been, yeah, we're going to do whatever we feel like doing. I hear you. We'll consider it, noted, that kind of thing. Because you don't see anything on the ground. And at some point, the president is going to have to make some hard calls. And he's pretty close to that point now. Either stop making these kind of statements because it makes it look like we're impotent and we don't have any influence on them and Israel's going to do whatever it wants to do. Or he's going to have to start taking some actions and saying, okay, we're going to pull back on our support. We're not going to give you as much stuff, or we're going to make some more actions, in public. Because one of those two things has to happen, because the truth of it is, right now, Israel is not listening to anything the United States says.
A quick follow-up to that. Do you think that would have to be, that threshold is the amount of civilian deaths? Is it a certain move that the military makes? Or if they don't wrap up this ground operation as the U.S. wants within 2 to 3 weeks? Like, what do you think is going to be that threshold to then put President Biden in that position to say, you know what, I'm taking my ball and going home?
It's going to have to be with the type of operations into the areas where the civilians are most densely packed. And you had Sullivan saying during that pause they had to get the hostages back a little while back, he said, when y'all start going into the south, there's going to have to be some changes. You can't do what you did in the north because the casualties are too high. They have continued to do that. There's been no change at all. The casualties continue to ratchet up, and there's not any change. And for there to be something different, there's going to have to be a change of tactics and operations. It can't be this area bombing situation. It's got to be targeting precise, like what we did, like what my troops did when I was in Middle East, where we had very targeted situations where we didn't destroy the infrastructure. We went after the actual targets. And so far, we haven't seen that. But that's what we would have to see. And if not, that's when the White House is going to have some hard decisions to make.
Yeah, we know U.S. officials have urged Israel to scale down the intensity of their fighting over the next 2 weeks. So this is something that we'll be watching closely to see if that actually happens. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
You bet. Thanks for having me.